Hey guys, before the show gets started, we just wanted to let you know that our paid class, Setting Up Your Year for Success 2018, today and tomorrow are the last days to register for that.
So if you want to learn how to do tapping, how to actually practically have a Sabbath, and want somebody to go through your goals with you for the year to organize those according to your values and your mission, last chance.
Yeah, it's going to be an interactive class. You know, Liz and I will be highly available the whole time. We'll be going back and forth, and it's going to be hands-on.
Lots of
web
homework.
link. Yeah, lots of good homework.
EpicEverydayNow.com/setting up your year for success.
Yeah, and if you just want to go to EpicEverydayNow.com, in the menu, there's a classes option. All right, here comes the show.
Hey everybody, and welcome to Epic Everyday, our weekday podcast for busy, stressed out Christians. You are such a punk. Anyway, for busy, stressed out Christians who don't want to stay in stressed out misery land and instead want to actually thrive.
Maybe someday we'll do a video podcast and you can see the...
You can see all the things my husband does while I'm
encouragement.
trying.
I'm sending encouragement your way.
Is that what this is?
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm Liz Frerichs, and this is my husband, Evan.
Hi there.
Who's a troublemaker. This week, we have been talking about simplicity. The idea that things are not as complicated as we make them out to be.
Yeah. The world, by default, loves to make things more complicated than they need to be.
I think we, by default, people.
Well, yeah, we're part of that. Yeah.
Yes. I'm just saying, it's not just a cultural thing. It's on an individual level also.
Yeah.
So today, since it's Thursday and we work our way through the CSCs, today we're going to talk about being connected and simplicity, which this is another area that we overcomplicate. There's kind of two pieces. One is internal, how we feel about the relationship and what we're thinking, and then external, how we actually relate to the other person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it probably really depends on the person. Some people, maybe this is only a struggle for half the people, but we're kind of both in that half where, I don't know, just tend to think, oh, is the relationship going okay? And do they get upset about something? And it all is happening in my head, and that's not really information collecting. It's all theorizing.
Right.
And that makes the relationship more complicated than it needs to be. And it's kind of invisible to the other person. Yeah.
I think we sometimes either worry about the relationship or suppress resentment. I know that was me for a long time.
Sure.
Like before I learned how to put down healthy boundaries, then people would just walk all over me and I would just keep suppressing, I'm upset. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, and this could be, I think it's a problem for people in general, but it could be especially problematic for the church because we think we just have to forgive and forget all the time.
Right.
And we've missed how does reconciliation work?
Right.
And that, that seems like we're simplifying it, right? Oh, just skip a step. But it actually makes more problems down the road.
Exactly.
If we haven't reconciled and we think we're just trying our darndest to forget this offense, and it's not, that's not how it works. You have to reconcile.
Right. Yeah. Forgiveness is the process by where we decide not to hold something against someone else, which for me, honestly, with some people, the way that has looked is saying, all right, I'm going to trust that God is your judge, that he's going to take care of this situation. And when I look at you, I'm going to choose not to be bitter and to think like, oh, you deserve something awful to happen. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to keep reminding myself, God's in control. God's their judge. I can't be a good judge because I'm too emotionally intertwined in this situation. But it's not now I trust you again.
Oh, sure.
Now I totally am going to let you do the same thing you did before, or...
Well, and you would do that kind of external, you're over there, and because the reconciliation is not happening on both ways with both people.
Well, I'm talking about forgiveness versus reconciliation.
Sure. Yeah.
But haven't gotten to reconciliation.
Okay. Right, yeah, right, if you're going to really forgive somebody, that's what you do, whether you have a good relationship with them or not, right?
Right, because forgiveness is about letting go for our sake. Mm-hmm. It's not really for the other person's benefit. Sometimes they don't even know that we've forgiven them. It's mostly so that we are not carrying that anger and that bitterness around in our own hearts. And it's so freeing to just be like, okay, Lord, I'm going to trust you to take care of this. And I think sometimes in the church, we misunderstand love and forgiveness. We think that love and forgiveness means glossing over the problem, whereas real love doesn't just let people get away with stuff, you know?
Yeah. I mean, we're commanded to do this. We're commanded to forgive as God forgave us. That's in the Lord's Prayer. And that is one of the hardest things to do. I mean, we think, I don't know. I think we understand it, but we really need to get into it and truly understand it.
Right. Yeah. God didn't minimize the sin.
There's no glossing over. Like, a debt has to be paid. I mean, that's what God is doing on the cross. He's taking care of our sin. He can't just say magically, oh, you know what? I'm just not even going to worry about all that sin stuff.
Right.
There has to be somebody. And in person to person, offenses and forgivenesses, there's debts there too.
Right. And we don't get over those by pretending that something didn't hurt or that it wasn't as bad as it seemed. We get it by facing the situation head on, saying, this is the depth of the damage, this is what happened, and then allowing the Lord to deal with those things.
And we need to forgive whether they say they're sorry or not, because otherwise we are carrying around this double burden. Right.
But reconciliation is where we actually go through the process of fixing the relationship.
Yeah.
Where you go to somebody and say, when you did this, it really hurt, or I was angry because, and then they say whatever they're going to say. If it's reconciliation, both people have to actually recognize what they did to contribute to the problem in the first place. Maybe my feelings were hurt, but maybe I was being a little oversensitive because they triggered something that already has a lot of emotional compound interest for me.
And if they don't understand that, having that conversation is going to be so enlightening to them that, like, oh, when I, whatever it is.
Chew gum in my face.
Sure, then, that really impacts me on a significant level, whereas, somebody without that history it'd just be a little annoying.
So both people admit, this is where I had a problem, because every relationship, every conflict is caused by two people. There's two sides and two people that need to grow past it. So we have to express those things, but at the same time, the longer we suppress, then the more emotional compound interest we're putting into the relationship and the more complicated we're making the relationship. Because it's much easier to come to somebody 2 seconds after they say something and say, hey, what you just did was a problem. Here's why. Versus 10 years from now going and being like,
this total blindside. But at that point, what we're shooting for here is simplicity, of course, but also unity. And unity involves conflict and reconciliation.
Right.
Because it just does. I mean, no group of people can function without conflict. I mean, it just happens. And then that restoration part is vital to unity. Otherwise, we have false unity, and then we're like a house. The church is like a house of cards. I mean, it just crumbles all the time, and it gets into trouble.
Yeah, church, family. I mean, any work system, any group that's ignoring conflict and, falling into that trap of trying to make it simple, but only making it simple on the outside.
Yeah, and I think what we're doing, we're building in simplicity as we go. If we keep these short accounts and we continue to reconcile, and we're actually building in strength so that when, an external problem comes, we're strong.
Right.
And so it might seem complicated because, in the moment it's like, we've got to have this conversation, but we're saving this complicated and destructive thing from the future. We're protecting from the future, some real complicated situation.
Yeah, I think too, a big part of simplicity is having grace with ourselves and others. Because if we don't, we're going to be like, this has to be done perfectly in this exact certain way.
Yeah.
And if we don't give ourselves the grace to make mistakes and give other people the grace to make mistakes, instead of being like, here are these 18 hoops you have to go through,
Yeah. And I think sometimes that gets back to what we're internalizing. Like the more I internalize a relationship with somebody or a potential conflict or a real conflict, the more complicated it gets. And it's all in my mind. And just, it's way more simple to just be like, hey, did that thing I said, did that bother you? Because I was thinking about it and maybe that was kind of insensitive. And then might be like, no. And then it's over.
It's over. Yeah.
And if they are like, yeah, then I can apologize right there. And that's way more simple than me being like, oh boy, what if they get angry? And are they angry? And, oh, they looked at me, like 5 weeks later. Oh, the way they're acting, it probably has to do with this thing I said.
Right.
That's so messy and one-sided. And we want to avoid that.
Right. I think, too, when we're talking about this, anytime we talk about conflict, I always want to add a caveat that dealing with conflict is messy and difficult. It's definitely the best way to do it in the long run, but it doesn't always work.
Sure.
You can do the best that you can do, and it can still turn into a disaster if the other person isn't in a place where they're ready to reconcile.
That's true. You can do everything right, keep it simple and straightforward, and you can still hit a brick wall.
Yeah.
And that's sad, but that's, you can only do your part.
Right. Yeah. I mean, a relationship is about reaching halfway and having the other person reach halfway back. And you can't reach the entire way. It doesn't work. Yeah.
That starts to cross that boundary line of our responsibility. We start to do the stuff they're actually responsible for. And that takes away our peace every time.
So, should we wrap it up? All right. Well, hopefully that encourages us all to be a little more intentional in our relationships, a little more short accounted.
Yeah.
And if you've never thought about the difference between reconciliation and forgiveness, I highly encourage you to look into that, because it has been such a freeing thing in my life to learn the difference after being raised in a church that was very much forgive and forget and cover over the offense means you pretend it didn't hurt at all. And so having the freedom to be like, no, this is messy and I did get hurt and here's how we actually deal with it instead of just having to pretend is so nice.
It makes stronger relationships, more long lasting, and a stronger church.
All right. We love you guys and we are praying for you. Thanks to everybody that's been sharing the show. We really appreciate it. If you have found this podcast helpful, please do share it. And as always, decide today, is your day going to be awesome or not? Are you going to have an epic day today or a blah day?
Yeah, you have a say in that.
Come back tomorrow and we will talk about being complete in simplicity, because a lot of the time we overcomplicate time-wise too.
Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.